Let me introduce myself first, very briefly here. I have a PhD in chemistry, actually, and I worked at the Canadian Centre for Electron Microscopy since 2010. I came in as a operator and scientist, and I operated the transmission electron microscopes, which we have a suite of, and it was up to atomic resolution. So I did that for several years, and I gained a lot of experience by being hands-on in a core facility and talking one-on-one to customers and collecting their feedback and dealing with our management and all that. At some point, I figured out that to actually efficiently run core facilities, like what is really needed is an information gathering platform that is better than Excel and other things. That is really like something that users and management can use as a single platform. So I started developing a lab management system called NanoLAMS in 2014, and in 2015 I actually founded a company called IB Scientific that holds the intellectual property around this. In 2017, I was actually appointed manager of CCEM. So I put that software to good use and used it to start developing good management practices around guidelines of core facilities. Now time has passed, and 3 years later we had a lot of changes at CCM in our management structure and governance structure. And in March, just at the beginning of COVID, I was appointed the acting executive director of CCM, and I'm now looking to develop governance practices and codification framework around governance and develop a new strategic plan, those kind of things as well. CCEM itself, the Canadian Centre for Electron Microscopy, is actually one of 17 MSI-funded national research facilities, which is very lucky for us because that is one of the rare opportunities to get operational funding for core facilities, which otherwise is very hard to come by. The CCM has been open since more than 10 years, and we have a suite of 15 high-end instruments. The total capital infrastructure investment is around estimated 50 million Canadian dollars. So it is quite substantial. We have high-end microscopy. We have a suite of different techniques that work together together with our team of 10 full-time staff to pull off larger projects. And basically, like one of our value propositions is to provide knowledge instead of data sets. So we go a bit beyond just acquiring data, but we're also trying to consult people with it, interpret the data, process it, and provide, in general, overline project management and be a single one-stop shop, basically, for companies and for academia as well to solve the material science problems. Last year, we had more than 500 unique users. That includes a lot of students that we train hands-on as well. There's industry customers from different sectors, and we have also government labs, and we have other partners as well. And one of the KPIs that I'm pretty proud of here is we have more than 140 publications from users last year that used CCM's data and their own data that they acquired on the instruments to drive publications, and that's a pretty impressive number. Basically, every other day, one publication comes out that CCM had a part in, and I think that makes our facility pretty unique and special. So I was asked to present a challenge and a solution to my core facility, and I think I picked something that hopefully speaks to everyone, and everyone can have a bit of a take-home message here with that as well. CCM, since we have so many different users, there's many different stakeholders with many different ideas behind what we want from the facility. As I said, academia, industry, students, faculty, postdocs, different methods in the facility, and we're limited in the end in terms of staff time and a little bit of instrument time as well. So how do you actually balance all of this? Well, I think the first point here is like every core facility should really have like a defined mission and a set of core values, like in terms of like how you want to be seen and run a facility. If you write something like that down, regardless of what governance structure you have, if you have a board of governors or not, it helps to, in times of hectic kind of daily business life, to go back to those kind of values and really look at them and make a decision based on things like that. And the other thing is like we're not alone, and together we're stronger. So engage with the right partners that can actually assist your business, and you can leverage knowledge of others. You can also leverage other platforms and other core facilities. So reaching out to that makes people stronger, and it actually really helps everyone in their KPIs and trying to get funding. The other really important thing is also to collect feedback, not just from the users, but also from your staff and from your partners and from your governance structure. Feedback is incredibly important, and sometimes it's inconvenient to listen to people, obviously, but if you take it kind of with the right storytelling, with the right grain of salt, you can get a lot of interesting input in your own governance. And in the end, the people using your facility are the ones. In the end, I always tell my staff, those are the actual bosses. Like I'm not. I pay people's salary at the end, but I'm not really their boss, because like the actual user fees and everything comes from the users. Without the users, we're nothing. Collect the feedback from those people, because then they will come back and they will feel heard. The other thing as well is delegate and leverage. In general, like managing a core facility seems to be an overwhelming task, but hopefully most core facilities have dedicated professional staff around them. Use those people actually and make use of that, and see if you can form like a good team between your staff, your partners, your administrators. That will make everyone's life easier and also lead to inclusive leadership, and that's in the end what people enjoy working at those core facilities. As a success story here for CCEM, this has been something that I've been working on even before I became manager, is really finding like ways of how to manage and govern a core facility successfully. I think typically people that work in core facilities are excellent scientists, and they usually have PhDs or master's degrees in their respective fields, but they're usually not really professional administrators and managers. So I feel there's always a bit of a lack of education, and I've definitely felt that myself when I was put in the seat. So a little bit kind of like how do you actually govern something successfully is definitely KPIs. KPIs is something that will help you incredibly. If you have numbers to back up your decision making, that works. And to that end, well, how do you collect something like that? Like use some kind of a lab management software. Like I developed my own in the end, and I'm also reselling it now. And like Master University, for example, now picked up mine and is actually distributing it over the other core facilities of the university. But there's many different programs fit for different needs. Not every core facility has the same business model and the same KPIs to monitor, but find something that actually works for you and actually use it. It sounds like a bit of a challenge for us to set it up, and there's a lot of learning curves in it, but there's definitely value with it over the long term when you apply for grants, and you can just pull out numbers about your revenue and users and where they come from and who they are and how much they contributed to your facility. And then the other thing is like really have like set up like a cycle about review that often and steer carefully and with vision. So people hate seeing kind of a flip-flopping course around back and forth. People look for long-term stability and a reliable partner. So in general, I think management is kind of like a long game and short kind of decision making. Sometimes it's necessary in terms of, especially like in crisis like COVID. But in the long term, if people see that facility is steered properly and successfully, they will come back. And the success business is based on repeating customers coming back to you and forming valuable partnerships. So with that, I again thank you for the award, and I'll hand it back to you.
Thanks, Andreas. Actually, your facility is pretty impressive. So I don't know if people have questions. I think we have time for you to answer a few questions. I actually have a question myself that also came up in the chat. You mentioned that your facility is mentioned or is linked to about 150 publications in 2019. That's a lot. Congratulations. I was wondering, and another person was wondering, like, how do you actually keep track of that? Like, do you have, tools, or because I don't know if everybody's mentioning you in the acknowledgements or sometimes in the methods, or if your name is on the authors list, or how does that work to make sure that you track all these publications?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, and something that we haven't figured out since the beginning, but we now have like a pretty good system down. One thing that you definitely would have to set up first is some kind of a policy around co-authorship and acknowledgements. Otherwise, there's going to be a problem. If then what you can do is like step one would be you could just look for your name in the full text of publications. And at the beginning, we tried that, and we would even have to hire like a summer student to sift through the literature. That's kind of a gigantic task and kind of expensive. At some point, I had a better idea. I was kind of like, why don't we let users do the work for us? So what we did is we set up in my lab management system, we set up a form to upload bibliographical information for papers, and we basically said as a rule, they have to acknowledge CCEM, and they have to attach a PDF as proof for that. And then what we did is we said, you get $50 off your next invoice. And with that, basically, it motivates people to A, not forget that you should be acknowledged, and B, they will upload the data for you yourself, so you can save a lot in staff cost in looking for that. And it's not cash, it's like basically it promotes repeat business because it's the next invoice, right? So
yeah.
This has been very successful, and that's why we actually collect that many publications. And we have to say like around half of those 140 or so, we actually get uploaded automatically, and the other like half or so, we have one staff that just also kind of looks for certain things and announcements. So it's a pretty good success story doing it that way. So sometimes you have to think out of the box and actually try to see if you can with small gifts in the end, like you can adapt that to your own core facility. But our $50 in the end is the total is probably less than 1% of our total revenue or something. So it makes almost no difference for us, but it helps.
But it's enough for the lab who's publishing to actually get motivated to do it.
Exactly.
I just have a couple comments, Maria, based on that. The Royal Microscopy Society just published guidelines for authorship in core facilities. So I was just thinking I can maybe add a slide to the PowerPoint presentation with some resources. So I'll put a link to that because it's something that we need to work on in our facility too. And I think, like you say, having that discussion at the beginning of the project about the involvement of the facility and what's appropriate.
Yeah.
And the other thing I had just been made aware of very recently, there's an initiative now for research resource ID numbers. And this is kind of like a grant number. And the ABRF is using it in their core facility database. And I didn't even know they had assigned us one. So we have one. And so we're really going to encourage our facility users now to put that in their publications, because then we can do, searches in PubMed and whatnot on that resource ID. And presumably eventually that could be linked to like OrcID for the facility staff and the facility directors and so on.
So how do you get one of those?
I think you can just request one, but I'll put a link in the slides on how to find that, because it's I think it's a nice idea, and they're starting to use it now for like cell lines and different things, so that you
Hello.
can
Speaking.
somebody on the
Yes, someone raised their hand.
He caught himself. Okay. Yep. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add to that, because I just researched that ID system last week, and the ABRF, what they call Core Marketplace, they've revamped that system, which is a database of core facilities, and they've included this resource ID thing in there. So once you have your data uploaded, they will assign you that number, and it is already linked up with the ORCID system. And they're also working with a database of instruments, basically, also to assign an instrument type an ID, so that it's easier to say, okay, I use this type of, I don't know, mass spectrometer, and you don't have to go ahead and explain it all, but just point to that ID.
Thank you.
Sorry, one question on that. So is the research resource ID, is this something that is provided to a core facility, or and then we basically just ask the users to use that information to put it in the publication? Is that correct? Okay.
That's how I understand it. So you're assigned through, for example, this core marketplace an ID, and then you ask users to refer to you by name and by this ID.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Great. Does anyone else have a question?
There's a few more questions in the chat. Would you like me to?
Yeah, why not?
One of the questions was, you have 10 facility staff, do you receive institutional support in addition to user fees and grants?
So we do get institutional support, but not for the salary of the staff, because that one in our case is actually covered partly by user fees and partly by the MSI program. We do get in-kind support for the actual physical space, for example, and we do get some cash contributions from the VPR's office as well in our case. And we have always approached interested faculties that are invested into our facility. In our case, that is like engineering, for example, mostly it's science and health sciences as well. So it's a bit of a mixture, but we are actually in a lucky situation where we're not relying on institutional support for our staff costs, because that is covered by the federal program.
Okay.